When I was a kid, it was imparted to me that Sonic the Hedgehog can really move. I was also informed he has an attitude, and that without exception, he's the fastest thing alive. But the proclamations of that theme song expired a long time ago, and the last few console generations have been pretty tough for Sega's insectivorous blue mascot. After several attempts to bring Sonic into the third dimension, an endeavor that proved as futile as shoving a square peg through a round hole, Sega has gone back to the drawing board. And for their once iconic Hedgehog, the result is a welcome and long overdue return to form. This is Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 1, and if the memories of your childhood play to the tune of Sega, then this is the twisting, turning, and blast processing game you've been waiting for since adolescence. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 is a classically styled Sega game, a real throwback to the company's glory days. After all, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 released for the Genesis in 1996, and from a gameplay and design perspective, this game picks right up where the first three Sonic games left off. You see, Dr. Eggman is doing typically evil things, and it's up to Sonic to chase him through 4 unique worlds, or zones as they're called in Sonic games, with typically blazing speed. Now, Sonic loyalists will be thrilled to know all 4 zones were inspired by worlds in the original games. You've got Splash Hill Zone, the Lost Labyrinth, Casino Streets, and the Mad Gear Zone, all faithfully recreated for modern platforms in stunning HD. Unless you buy it on the Wii, in which case it's stunning 480p. I think Sega deserves a lot of credit for the game's look. Sonic 4 uses the same art style that defined the original Sonic games and gives it a coat of modern polish. The colors are bright and vibrant, and although the game isn't a technical marvel or anything, it's great Sega kept the look as faithful as the gameplay. Oh, and yeah, the gameplay, that's pretty old school too. If you've played the classic Sonic games, Sonic 4 should feel very familiar, and if you like Sonic, that's a good thing. Just as they were in the 1990s, this Sonic game is all about tearing through big levels as fast as possible. You find optimal routes for Mach speed, build up momentum, and go all Roadrunner on Dr. Eggman's proverbial Wile E. Coyote. Everything fans liked about the first Sonic game in particular has been brought back for Sonic 4, loops and twists included. The levels have that same kind of large, open feel characteristic of the old games. You get the sense there are as many paths through the levels as there are rings scattered through them. And boiled to its core, Sonic 4 is about figuring out which one is most conducive to Sonic's ludicrous top speeds. In a way, Sonic the Hedgehog has always been like a sort of time trial from a racing game mixed with a platformer, and that feel also defines Sonic 4. Obviously, for those who enjoy Sonic games, this feels like putting on a familiar pair of red high tops. But if you didn't like this series even during its heyday, this game only reminds you why. To me, Sonic has never controlled with much precision, at least when he isn't running at full velocity, in which case he feels like he's trudging through mud, and that makes platforming a bit more difficult than it should be. Another problem I had with the original Sonic games, and therefore with this Sonic game, is the frustration inherent with a game based on momentum. Sonic is at its most fun when you build up the Hedgehog's top speed, but there are all sorts of enemies and obstacles that bring Sonic to a screeching halt, which is when the game is least fun. Since you're moving too fast to make out what's happening on screen, you almost have to memorize routes and enemy placement to avoid cheaply positioned foes and spikes, and rest assured, in classic Sonic tradition, there are several of them. Needless to say, it can get pretty frustrating. Also, Sonic 4's lack of multiplayer is a pretty glaring omission as well, especially considering that it was included in both Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. But when the pedal's to the metal, Sonic still provides the same visceral and unique platforming thrills of old. Sega walked a fine line for this release, and they walked it hard. They left enough untouched to make the few changes they did make, including a much improved lock-on combat system, feel subtle and actually beneficial. I think even the most hardened Sega fan would admit Sonic's been abused over the years, but this is his handler's mea culpa. This is a solid example of how to revive a franchise that most certainly needed it. For the first time in a very long time, Sonic fans have a legitimate reason to be excited. Pluses and minuses intact, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 is a long overdue blast from the past.